wanted to tell you a few things that I've been growing in my understanding regarding for a little while, maybe 12 years, something like that. And it's about the power that we are given to forgive. So one of the things that I don't often get the impression that we realize, and so this was some sort of my baseline on why I wanted to talk about this, is that we often don't realize that when the Lord tells us to forgive, He isn't saying to us that you weren't wronged. Now, I know a lot of people nowadays are saying forgiving doesn't mean that you're saying it's okay. It just means that you're letting it go and leaving it, with God, or you're just putting it behind you so you're not carrying it with you, or, different reasons. And none of them are necessarily inaccurate or bad ways of thinking of it, or even somebody giving you bad advice. Nothing like that. I'm not saying anything like that's the case. But I am wanting us to understand that unless you misunderstood, which happens probably 30 to 80% of the time in conflict and offense, there's a misunderstanding. And sometimes that person didn't do anything wrong. You were not unjustly treated or unjustly treated. You were not falsely accused, or you were not directly offended, though you felt offense. They were not coming at you with offensive intentions, and you misunderstand. That happens. That happens a lot. That people, sometimes just driving down the road, somebody makes a right turn and they didn't see you through their rear view mirror. They weren't cutting you off. I mean, you got cut off, but they weren't choosing to cut you off. They did not see you. So sometimes it's a misunderstanding. Sometimes it's a lack of grace and just human decency on our part of just understanding that human beings are vulnerable to making mistakes, that human beings are maybe just caught up in themselves and they mean nothing against you at all. And while it might be just inconsiderate to be caught up in yourself and not notice that you just cut someone off, it isn't necessarily an offense. So unless it's something like that, where you've already misunderstood, the premise of forgiveness is that you have something that is validly wrong. And that's why you are asked to forgive. See, when Jesus forgave sin, He was forgiving something that had actually been done wrong. So what I want us to kind of take a moment and think about is the fact that when something is done wrong, God says you have a leg to stand on. In the justice court of heaven, you are justified in saying, I've been offended. You are justified in saying they were evil. You are justified in saying they were ruthlessly evil. You are justified in saying they were absolutely malevolent. Now, not everybody's offense is that level, but I am saying that in your anger, in your sense of justice, in your hostility, you are not necessarily wrong. And I think a lot of the time, that's what people are saying to us. When we're offended, oh, you don't have any right to be offended. You don't have any right to feel like they did you wrong. And in reality, what it is you do not have any right, if you're going to accept Christ's forgiveness for your sins, to not accept it for their sins. Now, what that actually means, and I think I'm about to have a visitor coming in my house, so it's going to cause me to have to stop this video. But what I wanted to say about this is that that's where the rub is that when you have been wronged and you accepted Christ's forgiveness for your sins, that you somehow feel those people can't get off the hook for their sins. Did you know that God thought what they did to you was so despicable that the kind of crucifixion Jesus died on the cross with, the kind of beating he had on his back, the kind of mistreatment that he endured, was to pay the penalty due that offender? Yes. So every time there's an injustice done against you, you look at the cross of Jesus and you see what God thought it deserved. And then you step back and go, oh, it's been paid for. And you let it go. And you turn that person over to God, because at this point, what happened to you has been paid for. What happened against God is whether or not they accept that forgiveness. But if you accept it for you, you accept it for them, and then between them and God, whether or not they go to hell is dependent upon whether or not they accept it. But whether or not they're forgiven, if you accepted it for your sins, you have to receive it for their sins. And it isn't that their sins are right, that they didn't do anything wrong. It's that God thought it was bad enough to bloody up his son. It was an offense that is horrific in some cases. Some of the most awful crimes done against you or your loved ones. They're just riotously evil. And God is never saying it's okay. He's saying it deserved that. But look at my son. He took it. This is what I think of this wrongdoing that happened against you, and this is how I feel about it. It's wrong. It's evil. That's why Jesus is on the cross, to pay for it. The guy doesn't get off the hook. The girl doesn't get off the hook. The group of people don't get off the hook. They're murdered on the cross. They're brutally beaten and destroyed till there's nothing left because of the wrong they did. But it's in the person of Jesus Christ that the crime has been paid for. And they will only have to pay that penalty if they refuse to accept that sacrifice. But if you as a believer have accepted that sacrifice, that payment for the sin against you has been atoned for, and you can forgive, because he stands on your behalf saying, I am so sorry that happened to you, and I'm taking the penalty because I don't think it's okay.